truly believe in the magic.
How's it going, Magic fans, and welcome to episode 148 of Let's Talk Magic. On today's episode, we're going to be talking the offense in Orlando. We're going to be talking about trade whiffs. We're going to reflect on our recent games, and we'll also be joined by the main real estate holder on Jaylen Suggs Island, Mr. Dylan Holden, who is one of our Patreon members. Today's episode is brought to you in association with attractiontickets.com. I did a Paul trip up there. The UK's leading supplier of attraction tickets, providing everything you could want when visiting Orlando. This includes tickets to Disney, to Universal, which is my favourite, SeaWorld, theme parks, hotels. Crucially, they sell Magic tickets at highly competitive prices. So when you're planning your next holiday to Orlando from the UK, do check out attractiontickets.com. Use the links on our website, social media, and in podcast descriptions below to purchase all of these tickets, whether it's for theme parks, games, shows, other sporting events. And at present, there are multiple Black Friday deals available, including 10% off all US hotels and tickets. You can visit also letstalkmagic.com, where you will find our affiliate links for the NBA store and Fanatics, and where you'll find any discount codes we have available at the time. Just like the song says, there's just the two of us, and we can make it if we try. I'm joined by Mr. Mikey Clark, looking resplendent there in what looks to be an authentic Blue Stars jersey. Mikey, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, mate. I'm loving life this week, 3-1. I'm not going to brag about it from the top, but I am about getting the Bucks prediction right last week. I was sending Paul, bless him. Hopefully, he feels better soon.
Yeah.
That's the reason he's not with us tonight. But no, I was messaging him after that second Bulls win last night. Maybe I'm just getting a bit too excited. I don't know, but I said to him, I think there is a possibility that the Magic might make the finals in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
We could be one of those teams that just out of nowhere. I just see, you just vision where this team's going.
Mm-hmm.
And you think of all the things, all the area, and we'll get into this in a minute, but you think of all the areas the Magic have got a lot of improving to do. Like, if they get a couple of those things right, they are not far away from being really, really good. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm just loving life, mate. I think 3-1, 7-5. I know it's only 7-5, and we got the stand-ins to climb. And there's a long way to go. There's a lot of things to change yet, but we're in a really, really good place for me. How about you? How's your week been?
It's been good, mate. When you think about them from a Magic perspective, I haven't thought about the finals bit, but I think on the
I was probably been a bit too excited about that, but I just think. You think back, the reason I said it, like you think to the Atlanta Hawks, they got Trae Young. It wasn't that long before they actually made a run to the conference finals. And our ceiling is much, much higher than where the Atlanta Hawks were.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think on the defensive end, we look like an elite team. I know that's why we're going to talk about the offensive end today, but defensively, looking at that team, and I know we're going to talk about Jonathan Isaac in that second Chicago game. But when you're thinking about what J.I.'s got and what Jaylen Suggs has got on the defensive end, and then what Paolo and Franz can do, and if we can get the offensive end right, the foundations are certainly there with the Magic, and we're just all rooting for it. And I think we're probably all a little bit impatient now, wanting to get past that hump. But I know it's only 12 games, but 15 games into a season's when you start to think about things taking shape for me. Mm-hmm. And we're nearly there. And, you know, we're looking like being a 500 team. Touch wood, which would
I think we're better than a 500 team.
But 500 team's a playoff team, really.
Yeah, well, it should be. You're in and there and around, aren't you? But I think, like I put this in our Twitter group earlier. We're doing this and we're missing 3 starters. Mm-hmm. Like, you think of how good defensively we've been this week, apart from the fourth quarter against the Nets, but that was more offense as well. But there's just so much to like. There's so much more room to grow. We were talking on the phone yesterday, weren't we, before last night's game, and we were saying there's like, it's funny that expectations there now that the Magic should be winning games or should be beating teams that on paper we look at and think, yeah, that's one to mark down as a dub. But it's a nice place to be where we're getting frustrated about not playing well, throwing leads or losing games that we should be winning. But I've lost my trail of thought now. But
it's a different vibe, isn't it?
It's a different vibe. I think the most important thing, and I think we've all got to remind ourselves of this, and I think this is really important, is let's say in 5 years' time we win the NBA Finals. It might not happen. Who knows? But we've got to enjoy this moment now, because this might be the last reiteration of this group this season. Like, next year might look very different. This team might not be the way it is now. It might not be constructed like this next year. And I think, yeah, it's easy to get frustrated and look at games and think, yeah, but like the last 2 games, yeah, they've blown leads and all of that. But the maturity and the poise and the clutchness that Paolo Franz and like Joe Ingles, JI that have been playing with, I think this is something we've got to savour and really enjoy, because people look at the heart and hustle year, like, that was a special season, but this is just as big. This is like this is just a stepping stone to where we think we're going to be in 4 or 5 years' time, maybe even sooner than that. We don't know, but I think we just need to remind ourselves. Let's try not to get too frustrated. We're the third or fourth youngest team in the NBA, but they don't play like that. They play like they've got they're older heads, aren't they? They're much more mature than being that young.
I think as well, if you were doing the eyesight test of impact on games, I think certainly the last 2 games, but probably the last 4 games, the last 2 games against the Bulls, I think we've seen what Joe Ingles brings. If you didn't see it already, I think he's found himself. I think he's learning where the players are going to be now a little bit more, his teammates, and he's looked a lot more comfortable in the flow of the games for the Magic, and he's certainly in the second Bulls game, and I know we'll come on to this, but him coming into the game was where we really blew it open in the first half. It was because when Joe Ingles stepped in and spaced the floor, and he has looked more the part. Like, not that he was looking bad before, but I know there was different views on how he was doing. But I think if you did have that view, it's probably swung to Joe Ingles as being an asset in the last couple of games. Before we continue, Mikey, I'm just going to give a shout out to our Patreons, if that's okay. We do this every week, but these guys really help us support Let's Talk Magic. So we'd like to say thank you to Ollie Law, Gary Clark, Angus Craig, Dylan Holden, who's joining us, Alan Kane, Tom Sohn, Mark Joss, Sean Moore, Drummy Drum, I think I've got that one right, Paolo and Franz Warmth, Liam Radbourne, Andy Lindley, and Stuart Benzies. Thank you, everyone who supports the show. Thank you for the Patreons who are subscribing. If you're interested in joining these guys and joining our Patreon, we have 3 tiers available with varying benefits. So if you visit patreon.com, Let's Talk Magic, to join today, or click on the Patreon link on our website, which is letstalkmagic.com. I know we've got into this a little bit, Mikey, already, but we've obviously played 4 games since the last episode. Complete shellacking, I think Barack Obama would say, of the Milwaukee Bucks. The walloping in Brooklyn was disappointing. 2 nail biters in Chicago. We're 7-5, which is 7th in the East, but we're tied for 6th, really. As you've said, we've got some key players out. So Wendell's missing until possibly the new year. Markelle Fultz has been sitting out with knee issues. Jaylen Suggs, crash helmet needed, as has been said on commentary, but he's been banged up again. He missed the second of the Bulls games. But we have got to see Anthony Black come in. We've seen Goga Bitadze, I think, be impressive. I've really liked what I've seen from Goga. And Gary Harris returned to starter duties on Friday night in the tournament win against the Bulls. But we will start with the Milwaukee Bucks game. You predicted this, but we pounded the Bucks at the Amway. We saw Giannis put up 35 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists. But for me, it was the performance of Paolo Banchero with 26, 12, and 5. He matched Giannis for me. It went head-to-head. We saw Franz come in with 24. Got a great game from Jaylen with 20, and Mo Wagner was huge off the bench, as he has been all season, with 19 points for the Magic. What was your views on the game that you predicted the outcome of, Mikey?
I did. I said it last week, didn't I, about the barometer. Paolo and Franz play well. The Magic play well, and they both had 26 and 24 in this game. I think we did a good job of keeping the Bucks off the free throw line. I know Giannis got there 12 times, but he's not the most efficient free throw shooter himself. We out rebounded them. They've just played. They played with a lot more hustle. They played with a lot more belief than I think we have in previous years. What was it? A 14-game losing streak that we finally snapped against them. Efficient from three, 38.5%, going 10 for 26 from the field. We got to the line 35 times, which is a really good number for us. I mean, I predicted us to beat the Bucks. I thought it was about time that we should snap that losing streak, but I wasn't expecting us to go out and improve and create a lead like we did. And I think there was a lot of maturity, and this was one of those games where it was coming off the back of that disappointing loss to Dallas, where we threw that 13-point halftime lead away. I watched it disappear, and we really struggled to stay with Dallas down the stretch of that game. And they learnt this against Milwaukee. Like we built the lead. I think they got the lead down to, was it 11 at one point in the fourth quarter, and then we pulled away and put the game away. Yeah, I thought it was a great performance. I really did. JI on Giannis. I think he played really well against him. Bertadze guarded him as well as you possibly can. I think he's been a really good rim deterrent as well. Yeah, another really good game by Joe Ingles. You mentioned him in the opening, but I think Joe Ingles, you said about his he's looking more comfortable. I think he was more than anything. I think Joe Ingles is pretty comfortable with it as himself as a basketball player, but I think he's starting to understand now where Paolo likes his spots and where Franz likes the ball. He's intelligent enough that his passing's really, really good. He knows how to dictate the offense. And I think without Markelle Fultz out there, I think Ingles has been really important. So I think it's just one of those games where we've talked about Joe Ingles being another coach on the floor. He might not be putting the stats up in games that, I mean, he went 1 of 5 against Milwaukee, but he was still had a positive plus minus in this game, and he has in a lot of minutes that he's played. But Anthony Black was big. Jaylen Suggs had 20 apiece as well. Just a really, really good confidence boost for this team. And obviously they've kicked on and improved that this week as well. But yeah, what was your thoughts on that game?
Well, the first one is I'm just laughing thinking about Mo Wagner when Giannis was at the free throw line and he's just like looking at his like,
give it.
If you're ever going to just sum up Mo Wagner in a clip, I was like, that's it. It was impressive. Like when Lillard was out, I think it gave us a lift before the game. And I know people will say, oh, well, you didn't have Dame, but we came out firing like we had a point to prove. And it was one of those where obviously Paolo's, some would say it had a slow start of the season. And what really impressed me was how he took the challenge of Giannis. There was a lot of times where he was like picking up Giannis one-on-one and he held his own. And, you know, if we look back to the draft, the knock on Paolo was from some that what's he like as a defender? And we saw really in the summer that he stepped that up massively. Not that he was bad last season, because I don't think he was at all. But I think that's the one area of his game where it's taken a leap in year two, is that he's a better defender than he was in year one. And he took Giannis as a challenge. And there was times where they were playing one-on-one and Paolo was holding his own. And that's encouraging for me, because I think this season people are obviously wise to Paolo and they're doubling and tripling up. And the Bucks are one of the teams who were kind of like, yeah, we'll just go one-on-one at times with Paolo. And he did the damage and he held his own against one of the top 3 players in the NBA in Giannis. So that was my big takeaway. And then it was really, again, Mo Wagner, just what he's bringing us off the bench this season. Like, I know Cole's vital to our bench unit, but I think Mo Wagner has been massive for us this season off the bench, especially with the injuries to Wendell. I thought he had a tremendous game. So props to Mo. He's probably the Wagner brother that people talk a little bit less about, but I love him. I think he's great. So it brings us to Brooklyn. I'll be honest with you, Mikey. 5 minutes to go in this game, I just switched it off. I went, I can't take anymore. I was that annoyed.
Really?
I was like, this is appalling. I was really, really. angry.
Well, I wish I'd switched it off 5 minutes before the end. I actually was watching League Pass, and I don't know if anybody else has this problem. And you put the game on,
Yeah.
and I always try and avoid looking at the time on the video.
Yeah.
And I glanced, and I was like, "There's only like 15 minutes left." And then we were, what was it? I can't even remember now. It's like 6 days ago. We were. It was down the stretch, and it was one of those it was one of the rare games where we were chasing a lead down the stretch, and I was like, "There's not enough time." And then basically Spencer Dinwiddie put the game away for them. He was really, really good, wasn't he?
I had the same way. I was looking at it, and I was kind of like, "We aren't playing well. We don't look good. The energy's bad." And I was like, "This isn't going to happen." And I just had that much on with work that night, and I was like, I'm just going to stop this for a second because I think I know where this is going to go, and I think it's going to be a blowout. And I've never done this, but I looked at the box. I'm going to look at the box score, and it came up, and I just went, "Nah, this is bad." But obviously, it was one we lost by 20 points. Dinwiddie looked like vintage Dinwiddie, really, with 29 points, 9 assists. Bridges 21, Cam Johnson 20. We were really, really flat. Like Franz gave us 21, Paolo 19, Goga 14, but my big takeaway was just how flat it felt in that game. And we were, as you've said, we were just chasing, and we just didn't look likely.
They were looking for that spark, weren't they? They brought in Jet Howard for a few minutes, hoping that maybe he could ignite the offense and bury a couple of threes. I mean, Cole Anthony was only 2 of 8. It wasn't his best game. Sorry, 2 for 10, 2 of 8 from 3. They were just trying to find that spark plug off the bench because the starters really just didn't have it going, did they? Like we talked about earlier, teams are just double teaming Paolo. They're just crowding the paint. They're making it really difficult for the Magic to get any good look around the basket. And they're just daring us to shoot threes. We just fallen in love with the 3 in this game. What was it? 46 attempts, 16 for 46. Now, if you make 16 threes in a game, really the Magic should be winning games. If you're making 16 threes, that's not happening very often. But 46 is far too high for this team, and we didn't really get to the line. There was some dubious calls where we weren't getting to the line a few times. But 21 attempts, I mean, that number's usually higher for us. It just, like you said, the vibe wasn't there. There wasn't really a rhythm. And down the stretch, they were just playing frustrated, I think. And it wasn't the game that we wanted because it's obviously the first in-season tournament game. And they lose it by 20 and put yourself in that points differential deficit at the beginning is going to be tough to claw out of, despite winning in Chicago last night. But they responded. That's the important thing, didn't they?
Yeah, Alan Kane, one of our Patreon members, was saying, like, why do you think our free throw percentage is so low? I'll be honest, I don't know. It's kind of, there's players like Cole who look as though, you would bank on them and you still think he's going to hit it. Same as Franz, but it doesn't look quite as assured as last season. So what are we
on at the moment? So we are 23rd, shooting 74.8% compared to last season, and we were 78. So it has dropped, and I think, I said this last week again, Paolo's the biggest culprit. He gets to the line the most, and he's just not been that efficient from the line. I think if Paolo alone improves his percentages, then the Magic as a team's going to naturally come up as well, isn't it?
Yeah, because some of the money it leaves his hand, it's not going. There's times that Paolo
is it a concentration thing? Is it they need more practice? Do they need more reps? I don't know. It's a bizarre thing. Yeah. Who knows? But it has to improve, doesn't it?
It does. And then we got 2 nail biters from here, Mikey. Obviously, back-to-back wins against Chicago. So we're dancing and we're having fun. The first one, last second, 96-94, controversial circumstances. We blew a comfortable lead. Paolo's game winner as part of his 17 points. It's been ruled as a travel, I believe. He supported 16 points from Cole. Zach Lavine, 19 points, Vooch, 17. First game against the Bulls, any takeaways?
Well, in terms of the travel, yes, it was a travel, but I don't care because we won the game anyway. And second of all, I think Caruso should have been called for a foul. And I'm sure somebody made this point. Vooch was calling for a timeout after Paolo made that shot.
It was G, I think.
And they didn't have any, and they didn't have any timeouts left, which should have been a tech for the Magic anyway. And that never got called. That got missed. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there was things that went for us. There was things that went against us. But, I mean, we could almost blend these two games in together because the first half was almost identical to the first game. Yeah. First and second games were almost the same. What was it? I think 50-33, if my memory serves me right, at halftime in the first game, and 48-33 in the second game. And the Magic just absolutely smothered them defensively. I mean, it was a masterclass defensively. I mean, they've shown at an elite level how good they were. I don't know what you saw defensively in that first half.
I think for me, it was a bit like being in Weirdo World watching the two games because the second one, so I had to watch it. I watched a bit like you know, I'm not staying up in the early hours to watch it, but the second one I had to watch half this morning and half this afternoon. So I was like, shut my phone down, and I know it's bringing us into the second game, but I was kind of like, right, first game's happened. We had a big lead. We've smothered them. We've got. I'm comfortable, and then I was watching the lead fall away in the first game, and I was like, "What's going on?" You know, like the shots aren't falling. We're all over the Bulls. We just look so comfortable. We were playing as a unit. We look tight. The Bulls look frustrated. The crowd. We're not in Chicago. We're watching on League Pass, and you could feel the crowd at halftime in Chicago. I was like, "Wow, this crowd is sick. They're turning. We've turned the crowd. We've everything you'd hope for." Yeah. And then it came back, and I was like, "We're going to blow this game. We are going to blow this game." And I was like, thank goodness when Paolo clutched it. And then the second game, first half, went away, I came back, sat down, and I was like, right, surely not again. And I was just sat with a sandwich watching it, and I was like, have I missed something here? Like, this feels like deja vu, where we looked so
literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think our defense was even better in the second game than the first.
I think the offense was as well.
Yeah. Because for me, the second game, when it started off, it was a little bit like, oh, Chicago's come out a bit angry. And then Mosley made the switch where he surrounded Paolo with shooters, which when he brought, like, because we had Ingles, Harris, and Cole on the floor. That's right. And then the Bulls could only go 1-on-1 or at a push 2-on-1 with the ball being kicked out. And they didn't have an answer. They really did not have an answer. And I was like, oh, this is a preview of possibly the future here where teams are having to basically take their pick of, do you die by the inside or do you die by the outside? And I was like, this is interesting. And even the crowd in the second game, I felt were kind of like, here we go again. Like they were getting it as well. And then
they probably believe more because of the way they came back in the first game as well.
Yeah. But then when I was like, surely not again. And I went out and I was like, yeah, we'll win this game by about 20 because that's not going to happen again. That's not going to happen again. Then I came and I watched the second half and I was like, what are we doing? And then Lavine was hitting everything. And it's that thing where you've got like an all-star level talent and he's starting to go off. And I was like, wow, we are going to blow this game. And I know Alan Kane, one of the questions he submitted about the second game was about how good GI looked and did we expect him to look this good? But for me, that was vintage Jonathan Isaac. Yeah. That's the best he's looked since he's came back.
100%. 100%. I think going back to what you were talking about just now with the crowd. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I want to say they made the run earlier in the first game. The second game, what were we up 11 going into the fourth? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was around 11, wasn't it? Going into the fourth quarter, and you're thinking like Lavine started making threes earlier in the third quarter, and they tried making the run, and we were sort of keeping them at arm's length, and we were answering back on the other end as well. And then in the fourth, I had the same thing. I was like, yeah, we've got a comfortable lead here. But we have to have learnt from Wednesday night. And I think it just proves more than anything. Now, I know we talk about like the Magic need 3-point shooting, but I think it shows that what Lavine's capable of doing is the one thing we're lacking, is that player that can just go off and give you 30 out of nothing and breathe life back into a team. I'd say the only player that's probably capable of anything like that is Cole off the bench. I mean, he can turn into a microwave in no time, and he can give you 15, 20 points off the bench, but he doesn't have the same athleticism or size that as Zach Lavine has. And I think Zach Lavine was the reason they got back into that game in the second game in the in-season tournament one. But again, we talked about like the Magic lack of 3-point shooting. We had some really good looks down the stretch. Like Cole missed the corner three. I think Gary Harris missed one. Ingles missed it. Like there was opportunities there to put the game away. But when they took the lead though, and it was going backwards and forwards, I was like, they're finally gonna get their revenge. But it wasn't to be, was it? It wasn't to be. But
Cole went the second quarter, I think it was in game one. We saw like Cole bounce back, and he was like, he did a little bit of what Lavine would do, and Cole's a little bit out of form by his own admission at the minute. But we do lack that, where there's an all-star player who can take over from all three levels, and Lavine was doing that. But I do think, like, I want to talk a little bit about this, is just how good Jonathan Isaac looked in that second game, where for me, that I think it's everybody's highlight, where there was the stop at one end and then the dunk at the other. Did it look like a guy? Does it look like a guy who's been as injured as he has when he ran the floor and put that through?
No, I think it just shows you what JI is capable of. I'm not surprised. I don't think you're surprised either from what we saw from him. I think the one thing that's been lacking from him through the first 12, 13 games is the offensive output hasn't been there. You can see the defensive instincts are still there. You can still see he's capable of blocking shots, making things difficult at the rim, switching out on players, making life really, really difficult. I mean, you think like the DeMar DeRozan mid-range shot that got blocked by JI, that's just like classic JI. Like a player thinks he's got space and all of a sudden there's no daylight and he's blocked you. He's going down the other end. And like you said, they rewarded him on the other end as well. But I think it was a bit like, what was the game that JI had that big block a couple of weeks ago and he was standing over the player and
Houston,
flexing. Houston, first game, flexing. And you're like, that's like JI almost like letting a bit of weight off his shoulders and breathing a sigh of relief because he's back and he can put those last couple of frustrating years behind him. And I think this game offensively is the same sort of thing. It's like another stepping stone for JI in terms of giving himself that confidence back. But mate, he's been superb. And like I said it before the season, if the Magic might make the playoffs, JI is going to be a massive key.
Yeah.
Not offensively, but nobody can really do what he does defensively with his size. And we've got some really good defenders, but JI is elite and he makes the Magic defense elite as well. But yeah, hopefully this can continue for him because he's been brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those where whether he's playing the 4, whether he's playing the 5, because he's seen time there recently, it's very, very encouraging, particularly what we saw in the second game. We're seeing the minutes going up and it's the movement, the way he ran the floor and offensively putting it together is huge. And if Jonathan Isaac starts to shoot the 3 ball, which we know he's got it in his locker, it's there.
That's all you want him to do. If he can just keep teams honest and knock down a couple of games, he's gonna run the floor. He's gonna get to the basket. Paolo's gonna make those passes. He'll get rewarded on that end. I mean, he had a few dunks in this game.
Yeah,
those putbacks, offensive boards.
He'd missed a couple of them recently though, where there was one game, I'm not sure who it was against, where he kind of went up and it was as though he checked himself. You know, like he kind of hesitated. Yeah. And in this game, he didn't, and it was kind of like, wow, like it's there still, and it was just really encouraging to see. And for me, I think if you're putting him and Jaylen Suggs on the court at the same time, teams are going to have a problem. You could throw Anthony Black into that as well.
I don't know if you've noticed a trend with me over the years, but like it's fun watching players like Steph Curry shoot threes and like the crowd out, like Lavine did last night, but. I love grit. I love this Magic team. I love gritty teams that defend hard Watching JI play defensively is a lot of fun. Anthony Black, Suggs getting after players. Paolo's really improved defensively this year from where he was last year as well. And Mo Wagner getting under people's skin. Joe Ingles talking smack to players. He was having a bit of fun with Zach Lavine last night.
Bobby Portis,
he was under his skin massively.
Portis wouldn't speak to him, and they were teammates, and he wouldn't speak to him.
And you could tell he was in his head, even though he was trying to not let him get to him. But yeah, defense wins you championships. Defense gets you into the playoffs. The Magic have already got that in their bag. And like we've already said, we're already missing 3 starters. We're already missing Fultz, Suggs, Wendell. I was worried about our points in the paint, defending the paint without Wendell. But like we already mentioned, Goga's been great at that as well.
Mm-hmm. Offensive, because you talk about the defensive side, Mikey, and a statistic that's out there in an article I've seen recently was we have 97 points per 100 possessions. And if that was, taken into account, it would put us 7 points behind Portland's 30th ranked offense. Is that a bit of a surprise to you?
I don't think so. I think we knew offensively there was room for improvement. That they've been saying it all off season, haven't they? Like the defensive side of the balls is the number one thing they're focusing on.
Yeah.
And we know like the biggest thing is going to open up offensively if the Magic can just improve that 3-point shooting.
Mm-hmm.
It opens up absolutely everything. And I think probably again these 2 games against Chicago have highlighted something we already knew anyway, that first half of games were right up there. I think we're number 1 in points or offensive rating in the first half. Second half, and it's like the opposite end of the scale. But I think if the Magic finds some 3-point shooting, it opens up everything, because they're like I said, we've already mentioned this about games we've seen this week. Paolo gets triple teamed, gets double teamed. They're trying to make passes that aren't really there, like when somebody's cutting into the paint, trying to make a backdoor cut, they're trying to thread the needle, and there's just arms and legs everywhere, and there's not the space on the floor for Paolo to really go to work. And we saw last night, I think the second game against Chicago was a really good example, like when the offense was playing well, like you said, that at one point we had the Ingles in the corner, you had Cole Anthony out there, you had Gary Harris in the other corner. Paolo was like a different player. He was in complete control of the offense, because he had the floor spacing. And like you said, teams want to go, well, we'll let Paolo get his own, and we'll try and do our best to keep him out of the paint and off the free throw line. But if he kicks the ball out, you've got dangerous shooters there that can hurt you as well. And I think that's why there are question marks around the guards, because they are the ones that need to improve the most. But no, I'm not worried, and I'm surprised more than anything about the zone, because last year we were good against the zone.
Yeah,
and it's not something that's really. You tend to see when the Magic want to break the zone, you get somebody cuts into like the middle of the paint, and they get deep position in the paint at the free throw line, and then you get players making cuts out of that, and you sort of get teams to try and collapse into the paint and then kick the ball around the perimeter. It's just not really working at the moment. And I think again, teams are more worried about making life difficult for Paolo and Franz, and I don't know what you think, but I think the zone's been a bit of a disappointment compared to where it was last year. But
I think it's a huge disappointment, really, because it wasn't totally expected, and I do think teams have changed their approach, because I think Paolo and Franz are a lot more respected this season than they were last. But I think we do love this team, and we've got to say that the players who are on it, the coach, everybody we like, but it's going to be at some point who fits with, and I know I've said this before and I'm beating a drum, but it's who fits with Paolo and Franz going forward.
Yeah.
And I keep going back to it. I know, like, if anyone who's listening doesn't know this, me and Mikey get early starts to work on a morning, so we sometimes have like a 30-minute catch up a couple of times a week when we're driving to work and such. And my view is that Cole of the guards has his place on the team because he's the microwave and he's the guy who can go off and he offers that offensive spark. So I think he's actually safe as a guard, and I think we need players there who fill defined roles where we've got, like we've got ball handling 6'10" wings essentially, and we need guys around them who can do what we saw the other night against the Bulls in the first half last night, where it's Paolo has the space to go and work, and that means that we need people who can shoot and who can defend. That's ultimately where it's at, and I think we get that with Cole, and we're hoping that it's going to come from the other guards. But I think if it doesn't, and I'm not asking for anyone to get traded, I'll say that again, but I do think that is where the focus will come for the Magic to take the next step. It's giving these guys the room to work in, and it has to happen. And I know, like, if G was here, and Markelle Fultz brings a lot to this team, but I do think we need the floor spacing, which Markelle can do. If Markelle gets that mid-range going, which hasn't really been there this season, that changes things as well. And I'm just hoping when Markelle does come back, we can see that, because he's offers so much as a floor general, a fourth quarter ball handler, someone who's reliable, someone who can kick into the paint. There's so much he offers, but I think our guard rotation has to show what they can do to get the best out of the two guys who are really the safe ones in Paolo and Franz. So I'm interested in that, and that kind of moves us on, Mikey, a little bit, because there are whispers floating around on social media. We'll call it whiffs. And I know you listened to a pod the other day about teams who might make a move for Zach Lavine, and I know there's been mock-ups done on socials where it's like what he would look like if he went to the Lakers, because obviously the Lakers get everybody. I'm sure that Austin Reeves and D'Angelo Russell would be the people who they'd be looking at in trade packages. There's been people saying he doesn't want to go to the Knicks. Has that got something to do with Thibodeau? But we were floated out there as like a possible place as a team who might want Zach Lavine, who he fits a need for, and who we've got the assets to do a deal. Where do you stand on this?
So the name was brought up by Zach Lowe on the Lowe post earlier this week. And I think it was more of an honourable mention that he put the Magic in this category. And the teams that he was obviously talking about, you mentioned the Lakers, the Raptors was also another sort of team under the radar that he thought that Lavine might fit on. I think we've seen in person this week that Zach Lavine can go off in no time at all, and he can really improve your offense. He can be that spark plug. He's a 38% 3-point shooter for his career, I believe. He's a little bit down this year, but like we saw last night, like when he gets going, he's hard to stop. And I think any player like that, the biggest drawback with Lavine is that contract. That's the biggest holdback. And I'm not advocating for Zach Lavine necessarily, but he's the sort of player that I think the Magic need around, like you've already said about players surrounding Paolo and Franz that help spread the floor. Like you put Zach Lavine out there, who's 6'5", who's a respected 3-point shooter, or can drive, get downhill, get into the paint, which is another thing that this team likes to do as well. I think he does fit, and I think Zach Lowe is right on that. But the other thing he mentioned as well with somebody like Zach Lavine is Paolo and Franz are still that young that let's say in theory the Magic traded for Zach Lavine. They're still young enough that if they get it wrong and it doesn't work and they move on from Zach Lavine in 3 years' time, there's still loads of time there that they can pivot out of that scenario and go down another avenue and try and rebuild the team or retool the team around Paolo and Franz that way. And I think that's a really important thing, because whoever that player might be that we end up eventually moving somebody on for might not be the most glamorous name, or it might not be somebody who's got the best reputation around the NBA. I mean, I think the dream for somebody like Paolo and Franz to play next to would be like Devin Booker as a two guard, somebody in that mold. I think Devin Booker's 6'6", like ticking boxes in terms of size, 3-point shooting. I'm kind of glad we missed the Donovan Mitchell train, if I'm honest. As much as I like Donovan Mitchell, I think now Cleveland are starting to see that a pairing with a small backcourt isn't as easy to move forwards with, and they're obviously going through their struggles a little bit this season to begin the year. But in terms of a deal, you've mentioned this to me. I've not really looked into this, but I can't remember who the players you were talking about now that would have to be included.
So before I'll touch on that. What you said about the contract, I agree. The contract's a worry. Injury history is a little bit of a worry as well. I think for me, the comparison I would have if the Magic pulled this deal is actually when we signed Rashard Lewis as a free agent. And I know I made this point to you before, but it's a slight overpay on his contract. He's a guy who opens the floor up, which Rashard Lewis did for Dwight. He's a scorer, which Rashard Lewis was. And he's also a borderline all-star, where he may or may not make the all-star game, which is Rashard Lewis. So that's the level of player. I know they have different games, but that's the level I put Zach Lavine at. And
you're also trading for a player who knows coming in, he's got a defined role. He knows he's not the alpha.
He's
It was just
3.
the same with Rashard. The Magic signed him, and he knew it was all about Jameer and Dwight Howard.
Yeah.
And fitting next to Hedo.
He's number 3. He is number 3 on that team if he comes in. And I'm not saying we're going to trade for him or we're not, but I know we agree Devin Booker would be ideal. Like, we've had this conversation off air where we both think Devin Booker would be ideal, but that's where I see Zach Lavine at in terms of if a deal was made. It just, we have the players who are young enough where we could move on a lot easier than we could from Rashad's contract, which was a little bit of an albatross for us at the end. If we were doing the deal, and again, I'm not advocating for this. I don't want G turning up at my house with a pitchfork or anything like that. But when you look at what the Bulls need, Lonzo Ball is struggling. And it depends whether you believe it or not, but I know Stephen A. Smith's had his views on this. The Bulls are wanting a point guard. And I've seen it floating on socials where it's been talked about, and faults by non-Magic fans has popped up in deals about what the Bulls would want. I do think the Bulls would want that, and I think the deal would centre around on trade checker, where you're looking at Gary Harris would have to be involved for salary, Markelle Fultz, you're probably looking at Chuma, and you're probably looking at someone like Jet Howard to make the deal work. I did have a one the other day where I was tinkering about when Vooch becomes available, and I think it was those guys plus Goga, and it worked with Vooch coming back as well, which is just, like a bit of romanticism in seeing Vooch back in Orlando. But I know you said, Mikey, to me off air that the whispers are that the Zach Lavine deal, if he does get dealt, might not be what Bulls fans would think it would be because of, for example, the contract and where he stands at in his career right now. For anyone who's listening, I'm not saying I want to trade Markelle Fultz. I absolutely don't. I really like Markelle Fultz, but I think if the Bulls were going to make a deal with us, they would want a floor general back. And I think if the Magic were going to pull the trigger, if the Magic were in love with Zach Lavine, and given how Paolo and Franz are, I think there is where it goes back to that idea of what people's roles are and what they can bring around them. So I don't think Markelle would be off the floor in terms of a trade. I think the Bulls would probably want Jonathan Isaac, and I'm not sure we would do it. I don't think we would trade GI right now for Zach Lavine. No. If it was Devin Booker, maybe we would. But I don't think Jonathan Isaac would be on the table because of where Lavine's stock is in terms of being a borderline all-star, in terms of being not content in Chicago by the looks of it, and injury history and contract. It's maybe not a bigger ask as you would think. I think if we were to try and go for Lavine and Vooch, we would have to put some draft stock in there as well.
I think I want to make this really clear. I would be really hesitant about making a big move now anyway this season. There's going to come a point where we're all a bit like we can see where this team's going. Like you can envision, like you can see the way Paolo, although the points per game's he's not increased it massively from where he was last year. The same with Franz, but I don't care. We're 7-5 compared to where we were this point last year, and we are much better. Like we are elite defensively. I think before we jumped on, I had a quick look. We are second in defensive rating this season at 106.5. Like we are an elite defensive team, and we're missing some key players still as well. So I'd be really concerned about making a move that upsets the apple cart now whilst things are good, and there's still like you get Markel back, you get Jaylen Suggs back, you get Wendell back, and see what this looks like after another 40 games before you even really consider anything like Zach Lavine or anything even close to that. So that's the first point, is I'd just be really hesitant about making a move yet anyway. But there is going to come a point where they are going to want to pull the trigger on somebody.
Yeah.
I think Zach Lavine probably fits. Some people will disagree with this, no doubt, but I think Zach Lavine fits as a guard, as a wing. I think he fits better around Paolo and Franz probably than any other guards. Other than maybe even Cole. I know Cole coming off as a sixth man, but Lavine next to Paolo and Franz probably makes more sense than any of the guards that we have already. That's not to say, again, we're not advocating it was trading for Zach Lavine. Just looking at a trade machine, and I'm just looking at pure salary, but you're right. If the Magic were to make a move now, Zach Lavine's getting 40 million this year. I think he's 28, so he's still young. Like he's still he's still the right side of 30. It's not like Zach Lavine's been around for a long, long time, but he's still young. So his 40 million contract, if you put him in a deal with Chicago, Fultz, Gary Harris, and Caleb Houston, according to ESPN Trade Machine, works.
Yeah.
And according to Hollinger's analysis, it would give us an extra 5 wins move in for Lavine. Now, if you did that, I would be concerned about how the offense initiates at that point, because if you moved on from somebody like Markel Fultz, who gets players in the right spot, then that's a valid point. But I also think, and again, no pitchforks from Geraint, hopefully outside of my house either, but like, I get it. Like, yeah, Markel makes you better. Like I said last week, Markel on the floor makes us better. Wendell on the floor makes us better. But our prime focus is getting the most and maximizing the potential of Paolo and Franz. And if you want those guys initiating the offense eventually, like you want everything or the majority of what you do to run through those two players. So if like that's another positive to take from this week as well. Yeah, it's been frustrating. We've lost leads. We're still 3-1. We should be 4-0 if we hadn't have just crapped the bed against Brooklyn in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
But it's forcing Paolo and Franz to play through this, and it's really key, valuable learning lessons for those two. It's valuable lessons for the front office, for them thinking, right, how does this look like if it is Paolo, if it is Franz, if we want the ball in their hands and everything runs through them, how does it look with the ball in the hands? So I think it's a good thing as well. Obviously, we want everyone back healthy, but I don't know, mate. It's a key. Like, there's part of me, and I'm like, because I like Zach Lavine, I do like him, but how he fits, I think he's more of a natural fit. But I'm really hesitant about making any sort of move at the moment. I would rather, at this point, if we're looking at February, looking further down the line, if we're still in or around 500.
I think for me, I agree, but it's kind of like I'm not jumping on here going every day, let's make a trade. It's just that it's gathered that much. There's that much talk about it on, and I'm not saying it's rampant, but it's made like podcasts. It's been floating around on X. It's a talking point, and it's a one that we've therefore got to address. And we don't want to break these guys up yet. We want to see what we've got. But it's a talking point, and if you go off what people are saying, people are saying, well, the Bulls would want something back, and what they'd want back's a ball handler. You know,
if I'm the Bulls, I don't care what I get back here tanking if you blow this up.
Yeah.
So you want draft picks, which, again, this is a thing Zach Lowe said, that I think Bulls fans need to prepare themselves for what they're going to get back for Zach Lavine if they do move him, because it's not going to be like Rudy Gobert level sort of stuff that teams have given up for good players over the last couple of years.
Well, look at if they want to look, they were involved when we started tanking, and look at what we got for Vooch.
Yeah,
the draft picks were the key there, and I'm not knocking Wendell at all, but you know, like what came back through that deal, Wendell was a bonus. It was about the picks.
Yeah,
and I think the Bulls are probably looking at something similar, where Vooch was a borderline all-star. And he was on a team that was ready to tank, and he was going to a team that was looking to take steps forward as the third asset, because they already were, like, obviously Lavine and DeRozan are the guys that they were going forward with, and Vooch was the third guy. And I think that's possibly a view of when Lavine goes, it's going to be something similar. What can you get back in terms of either young talent and or picks?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's close to home for them.
It's fun to talk about, isn't it?
It is. And I'm just going to say again, like, I don't want a pitchfork on my lawn when you hear this. We're not saying trademark health faults. Nobody's saying that. We're just reacting to what's doing the rounds. So we are joined by Mr. Dylan Holden, who has just gone famous in the last 24 hours as a meme, Dylan. It's been a while. It's about a year. It's just over a year ago since we were stood out the front of the Amway for the season opener in Boston. It doesn't feel like a year's passed. So how are you today, and how do you feel about your meme status?
Oh, it's been a good day so far. I just been waiting to talk Magic basketball. The meme last night, it was pretty cool. Got a lot of feedback from it. I actually had to mute the meme because it was going off 2-3 o'clock in the morning trying to get some sleep. So, but it's great, man. You know, I love the Magic, and people that know me know that. So,
absolutely, you are like a huge Magic fan. Like, I know that from meeting you and speaking to you before. But can you tell our fan base, people who watch the pod, listen to the pod, how did you become a Magic fan? And because you aren't based in Florida.
No, I'm actually in Maryland, and I became a Magic fan because my grandfather, he used to send me tapes of Shaq and Penny back in the day playing, and I was about, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years old. My first jersey was a Shaq jersey, and it just grew from there. A lot of main memories with him and my grandmother are surrounded by the Magic. Went to a lot of Magic games as a kid. I always tell people all the time, it's not many times as a fan you get to have all your favorite players on your favorite team, but I did. We had Shaq, we had Penny, then I went to T-Mac, and then Dwight. So I never had to go to another team to look for my favorite player. He was always on the Magic.
Which Magic jersey did you get as your first one, just out of interest?
The Shaq, the old school pinstripe blue Shaq jersey.
You had the blue one. So my first one was the black one.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I became a Magic fan. I was in Florida, and I was all set for getting a Jordan jersey because I'd only ever heard of Michael Jordan. And then my dad came back and he was like, "Oh, the guy in the store said you don't want this jersey. You don't want that guy. This is him." And it was the black champion, number 32. And obviously I started to follow Shaq, and just as a kid, unreal.
Yeah, hopefully we go back to those jerseys at some point. I know there's something with the rights or something that they can't go back to that. But, I mean, every Magic fan loves the pinstripe. So
how much better does it look this season when we've got the classic jersey, the T-Mac Stars jersey on the court? Like, how much better does it look?
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's one of our better ones that we've done. I know I've said many times I hated the orange jerseys. I'm glad they got rid of those. We're black and blue. We don't need a different color. our colors are iconic already. So
Do you like this season's City jersey?
I do. It's not my favorite, but it's definitely not bad. I think it looks better on the players than it does online.
Yeah.
I think if you see a picture of it online, it doesn't look that great. But when the guys are out there running around in the jersey, it looks a little better for sure.
I know when it dropped and they do like the glamour shot of the jersey, and I was like, oh, that's okay. And then someone snapped one where it was hanging up in a store, and I was like, not as sure. And then I got it basically released in the UK, and I got it slightly cheaper than it would retail for. And I was like, right, I'm going to get it, hit it, and see what it comes in for. And when I got it in hand, I dropped the guys from the pod a message, and I was like, in hand, this jersey is so much better than it looked. So
I assume you got a Cole Anthony jersey.
I really wanted one, but I had to go with what Nike were offering. So Nike had the deal on, and I scored it. I got a Franz one. That was all they had on the site. And I was like, I wanted to get Cole, but when I went on to get Cole, there was no customization of a large. So
okay.
I just went, right, do I take it? Do I not? I'm just going to go for it. So I thought I've got it a little bit cheaper. I'm just going to get Franz, which I can live with. But I was all geared up, Dylan, for a Cole jersey.
Yeah, I figured that.
I'm a little bit disappointed because I really wanted a 50 and I couldn't do it. I obviously am a big Cole Anthony fan. You, in Magic fandom circles, if we were to look at Jaylen Suggs Island, you hold the most real estate on Jaylen Suggs Island. So I think you've basically got the equivalent of the White House on Jaylen Suggs Island. Here's your opportunity. Talk up Jaylen Suggs. What is it about him, and what do you think his season's going to be like?
Well, the main thing for me when we first drafted Jaylen Suggs, I felt like he was the next great guard, was going to be the next great guard on our lineage of guards that we've had. I expected him to be a 20-point per game scorer. Now, that could still happen, but even myself, I've had to probably come to the realization that may not. But he has the ability to do that. We've seen certain games he has where when he's hot, he can get going, driving to the rim and hitting threes. For me, with everything that goes on in today's NBA, with players not playing as hard as they should, man, Jaylen doesn't cheat the game. He gives you 110% every time he's out there. He's one of the best defensive players in the league already at 22. And he just goes 1,000 miles per hour. Sometimes it gets him in trouble. But to me, man, as a fan, when you have a player like him giving 110%, how can you not root for the guy?
Yeah, I would say that Jaylen and Cole, for me, both give me the vibes of players who would fit in the Heart and Hustle team in that era, where there's just the enthusiasm, the passion, etc. It's infectious.
I mean, you see the nonsense going on throughout the league with other stars like James Harden, for example, forcing his way out and, being out of shape and things like that. With Jaylen, you don't have to worry about any of that. And he shows you those big flashes of, man, this guy could be really good. Like he could average 20 points a game, but his 3-point shot isn't where we all want it yet. But I think if he can stay on the floor, hopefully he comes back from injury pretty quickly. If he can stay on the floor, he's got a real chance. But like I think I tweeted the other night, I think even us as Magic fans, we're just going to have to accept Jaylen's flaws a little bit, because I don't think with what he brings on the defensive end, I do not think he'll be going anywhere anytime soon unless he is in a trade scenario where we bring in another star. I don't think they're just going to trade Jaylen Suggs for, peanuts or anything. So I think we're going to kind of have to live with what he brings to the table.
He's drawn some interesting comparisons, Dylan, because I know when he came into the league, there was kind of like the Marcus Smart, as he Drew Holiday, etc. If you were doing a player comp for Jaylen Suggs based on what we've seen so far and where you think his ceiling is, what would be your comparisons for him?
I think Marcus Smart is a good comparison. Now, for myself, I wanted to compare him more to like a D Wade when he first got into the league, because that was the hype that he kind of had. Everybody forgets that he was top 4 in that draft supposedly. So he was supposed to go a little higher than he did. I was glad when we picked him up, number 5. We got lucky with that. So, but I think Marcus Smart is the comparison best for him now because of how he brings intensity to the defensive end.
Yeah, I can see that. And again, the hype around him was unreal. And on draft night, when he slipped to 5, I remember watching live and I was like, we're going to take Jaylen Suggs here. And it's still working out for us. I know there's some people criticize because of the shot. It's usually people outside of Orlando. But everything else is there. And if he becomes a 37% three-point shooter, it's dangerous.
I mean, just for an example, like not last night, but I think it was the Nets game. I mean, the first Bulls game. Jaylen had a horrible game, but at the end, guess what? Guess who got the steal from Vooch to seal the game? It was Jaylen Suggs.
Yeah.
So he played terrible, but he still made a big play down the stretch. And that's the big thing with him. Like, he could be playing terrible all game, but if he makes 1 or 2 big defensive plays, he could turn it.
Yeah. He doesn't
turn the game.
He doesn't run away, does he?
No, he doesn't run away, and he doesn't stop. He just keeps going. So
he wants the pressure, and he wants the shots at the end. You know, like when the ball's there, he's like, yeah, I'll take it. And it's similar where you see players like him, Paolo, Franz, Cole. They're kind of like, if they miss, they will do it again. They will go back, and they're not put off by it. Suggs is I'm willing him. I'm willing that shot. I'm sitting there and I'm like, come on, like I just want that shot to get to that 36, 37 and then see where we go.
Yeah, I mean, imagine if he hits that shot against LA, the first LA game. I mean, he had a great game, but he missed that shot, so everybody's upset that, see, he needs to have a better shot. But we wouldn't even have been in that game if it wasn't for Jaylen Suggs.
It was infectious. He's been impressive. If people who's watched the games of the Magic this season, Jaylen's been a big part. I was really, really worried when he wasn't suiting up last night because I was kind of like, oh no, not when he's had a good start. And then I think, from my view, when Jaylen's been doing well for the Magic through his 2 years so far, whenever he's hit form, he's hit an injury, and then he's had to play himself back into like game shape, etc. And I was like, I don't want this to be a long injury. I want him back straight away.
Yeah, you got to have him back, and the fact that he was in Orlando all summer, really putting work in. I mean, we all saw it online. Like, he was the main person in Orlando, putting in work, and he just really seems like he turned a little bit of a corner. Maybe not with the shot, but I think with his confidence and where he's at as a player, I think he is, comfortable with it and has the confidence to go out there on the floor and perform every night.
Absolutely, his physique as well is from the end of last season to the start of this. He's just grown. He looks like a guy who's just worked all summer, and fair play to him because we're all willing him, and we're all there ready to buy some more real estate on the island if you'll allow us, Dylan.
Absolutely, I'm not going anywhere. He's not going anywhere either, so it'll be here for a while.
So we're talking Jaylen Suggs, but we've got the Magic overall this season. Are you happy? What's excited you so far with the Magic?
I think the biggest thing that's exciting me is, obviously Paolo and Franz, and just being able to turn on the games and not have to root for losses anymore. But I also think that's a double-edged sword because that brings some overreactions, because like there's no lotto balls at the end of this year to like save us. So like when we're losing to teams like they did the other night, the Nets, and they're in your weight class and you're losing by 20, you just get really, really frustrated because it's like, okay, we can't drop games like this and like just not show up. Like we don't have the lottery waiting for us at the end of the line this year. It's either we're going to be in the playoffs or we're going to be, just going home. So that's the one thing about being happy about being relevant again. Yeah. And I haven't realized that in about a decade. I think that's why some of my tweets come off like they do, because I haven't, not gonna say that I haven't cared as much, because I have, but when you're in the position the Magic have been in rebuilding, when you lose, sometimes it's like, well, we're gonna have better lottery odds. So, but this year you don't have that, so that's why it's like the expectations have brought on a whole new fandom for a lot of us.
Well, the expectations have totally changed, and we've both been here for a long time now with this, and I think that for me, this is the most expectation I've had since we drafted Dwight.
Absolutely.
Because when we drafted Dwight, we obviously had Steve Francis came in, Coutinho Mobley came in, Grant Hill was back fit, Hero was there. And I was like, yeah, this roster's actually pretty decent. We've lost T-Mac, but it's pretty decent. I expect to be bouncing back. And it was the first time since then where I'd gone into a season going, I don't expect us to be bad anymore. Like I know when we lost Dwight, I was kind of like, we could be here for a while. And even when we made the playoffs, for me, it was more of a surprise when we did it. So this is the first time in a long time where I've gone from no expectation to actually I'm expecting some playoffs at the end of it. So.
And I know for myself too, like because we love this roster so much, like the actual guys on it, like you love Cole, I love Suggs, G loves Markel, like that makes it ratchets it up even more because you don't want to see none of these guys get traded. Like I know it's going to happen at some point that this roster is going to look different, but like I don't know. Right now, I don't want to lose any of our guys, man, and even Coach Mosley, like I don't want to see him, gone. I want to see him see this thing through. I know he's been catching a lot of flack lately, but I think overall he's a pretty solid coach, and I think with this core, if they let him see it through, I think they have a good chance to be good. But sometimes if you don't win fast enough, they don't let you do that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the team is likable, isn't it? Like there's a lot to like on this team, and I'm with you. It's watching the players grow and evolve. And you take somebody like you have Jaylen Suggs, like I have with Cole, and you're kind of like, I am willing it for this guy. Like I'm willing Cole to a sixth man award. I'm willing him to be the 20 points a game guy, which he can be. But I do know as well that at some point this squad's going to change, and it's going to change around Paolo and Franz, and that's basically it. And I think Mosley's done a good job for us overall, and I really hope he gets the time to see it out. So that's going to be something. So the Magic, we're looking at like a next step. What would that next step look like for you, Dylan, for the Magic to actually take the next step? What would it look like?
I think the first step would be we have to hold second half leads. We can't get up 18 points on a team and continuously let them come back. But I mean, obviously, the main answer is you have to, at the minimum, make the play in this year. I think if we play up to potential, we could actually make the playoffs. But I think the play in is definitely that. I mean, that has to be a goal at this point. I think actually the season would be a step back in some aspects if we don't make the play in. Just with the talent on the roster, night in and night out, even with our shaky offense at times, our defense should be able to carry the day. I mean, we should have a top 5 defense all year if we can stay healthy. Obviously, I mean, all this is, of course, if you're healthy. So,
well, if we're healthy and we're seeing GI's minutes start to increase, and he looked better than vintage against in the second Bulls game to me. He was phenomenal. But if you put GI and Jaylen Suggs on the court together for major minutes, you've got two guys there who are two of the best defenders in the league on one team.
Yeah, the way he looked last night against the Bulls, Ji he got me, perked up and kind of bought back in a little bit because I didn't expect him to look like that ever again. So, props to him. I'm glad he proved me wrong, and hopefully he can stay healthy because it's clear that he really helps his team when he's out there on the floor. He basically carried us last night against the Bulls at certain stretches. So, big up to him.
Oh, GI, I think if we hadn't been talking injuries, he's in that unicorn conversation, isn't he? Because he came back and we've seen the defensive impact, but last night's the first time since he's came back where we've really seen, for me, the offensive impact which he can have as well. And I know when there was the stop and then the dunk in the second half, that was poetry.
Yeah, that was like one of those I'm back moments. And you just hope that he can turn the corner, and I hope the coaching staff keeps him out there, because sometimes I feel like they hold him back, good or bad, or indifferent. They kind of hold him back sometimes. But we know how the Magic are with injuries. They're overcautious instead of putting their guys out there. So,
yeah, I know I agree with you, and I think it's going to be one of those where we've had the injuries in the past. I'm hoping it's behind us, because he is such a difference maker, and if he gets himself back on the court and plays 60 games plus for us this season, that idea of being in the playoffs, getting the sixth seed or something, it's more attainable with Jonathan Isaac there. So if you were putting it on the line, Dylan, and you were saying, I'm going to call the Magic season now, when the last ball has been played in Magic basketball this year, what has the season looked like for us? If you were...
I think we are a playoff team.
Okay.
I think we give somebody a big scare in the first round, but because of our inexperience, we probably lose in 7 games in the first round of the playoffs. Now, obviously, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we could get out of the first round, depending on who we played. But I think that would be a successful year for us. It'd be heartbreak to lose in the first round, but I think that right there would be a success. I think anything other than that, and you're probably, looking at a big shakeup at the end of this year. Maybe not necessarily a big shakeup, but everybody won't be back if we don't make the playoffs this year, I don't think, unless there's catastrophic injuries.
Yeah, well, injuries could change everything, really, and I think I agree. I think for me, with the playoffs and such, if we don't do it, in particular, if we don't do it, I think it's possibly the last year we see everybody who we've got ties to and likes possibly being there in the following season. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping that we make the playoffs, and I'm hoping that we play meaningful basketball, games that count for these guys.
Because when the guys are on the floor, I mean, they've played, pretty solid this year so far. They've let a couple games get away that they should have won. They should have won that first Laker game.
Yep.
They should have beat Atlanta. Yep. But if we win those games, I mean, we're talking about a team that's what, 9-2, 8-3 at the worst. So I mean, you can't be too upset with them. But when you're watching the games, tweeting, sometimes you forget that they are young and they do have things to learn. But the young mantra is getting old too. I mean, just look at what Nick Anderson said before the season started. He said we could play with anybody. Now Nick Anderson is around these dudes a lot more than me and you are. Mm-hmm. So obviously he knows something. So if he's holding them to that standard, it's hard when you're watching the games not to hold them to a big standard, because like I said, he's been around them. So I'm going to take what he says, to the bank.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, there's a point where I think this season it's seeing what we have. I think there is an element of that, but there is expectation. And I think the expectation's higher up as well. And there's guys there where you go, okay, they're young, but young in sports at 25 and 24 and things like that is okay. We're starting to see how you're going to pan out a little bit. So I think,
yeah, sorry about that. But I was just going to say, and then you look at Paolo and Franz. Paolo was a superstar last year, averaged 20 points a game, rookie of the year, had LeBron James comparison stats. And then you look at Franz Sommer and what he did with Germany, and basically turned into a superstar overnight, internationally. And so when they get back to Orlando, obviously you're expecting for those two players to show up. Now they have in spurts this season, but we haven't got the consistency where you would like to see it. And that I think adds to the frustration, because like Jamal Mosley said, these guys told on themselves. We know they can play with anybody when they're locked in. We know they can win big games. They beat Boston. What was that? Twice or 3 times that we beat Boston last year?
I think it was 3 times we beat them last year.
Three times we beat them, and then you beat Golden State last year, and you had other big wins. So they told on themselves, and that's why we are where we're at, because we've seen them do it.
Absolutely. I think for me, I know we spoke off air before we started recording, but I think during the second Bulls game in the first half, when Coach Mosley made the substitutions to give Paolo the floor spacing, and then that's when the lead opened up. When we saw like Ingles there, I think Gary Harris, Cole Anthony were all on the floor, and no longer could they cram the paint. That's maybe an insight of where things will eventually go, where I think he knows we need shooters.
Yeah, I think all Magic fans know we need shooting. That's not up for debate. But Paolo definitely has to demand the ball, and last night, he did that, especially in the first half. They need to run the offense through him. He's 6'10". I would like to see him in the post a little more, maybe draw some more double teams and kick out the shooters. But we'll see where it goes. But they're going to be okay, but they're just not moving at the pace we fans want, and that's understandable. So
yeah, we're hungry, aren't we?
Yes.
We're hungry. So Dylan, is there anything you'd like to plug? Any socials for anyone who wants to give you a follow? Especially now that you are meme famous on X or Twitter or whatever it's called.
Yeah, whatever it's called nowadays. It changes daily.
It does.
Let me see here. I don't want to screw my own tag up, so I'm gonna just look at it. Okay, so I'm on X, guys. O Town for Life 1. You guys can find me on there. That's really the main platform I'm on. Twitter, as far as for when the Magic are playing. But a lot of you already know me, and I'm sure more people in the UK will after this pod, because you guys are famous over there yourselves. So.
Or infamous.
So.
What I'll say is, if anyone's watching and you want to actually give the president of Jaylen Suggs Island a follow, you've now got the details. Dylan's a lot more famous after last night than any of us are, and that's where you can get him at. Dylan, thank you for coming on and giving up your time on it. It's a weekend. We're filming on a Saturday here, and we spoke again off air how hard it is with the time difference to get things right for filming this, and we appreciate it, and thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem. I always love jumping on, talking about the Magic, and talking with you guys, man. I met a lot of you over a year ago. It was fun, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. So
I hope so. I've still got the photograph on my wall downstairs in the kitchen.
Goated.
It's there. If you ever want to see it, I can just snap it on my phone. It's up. All right, man. But what I'll do is thank you again. Please, anyone who's watching this, give Dylan a follow, especially if you're a lover of Jaylen Suggs, because that is where the main propaganda is coming from.
Absolutely.
So, Mikey, we're recording this on Saturday, November the 18th. We're next recording next week. We have 4 games before then. So we've got Indiana coming up. They've been surging. Therese Halliburton looking great again. Offensively, very proficient team. We've got Toronto, and it's the in-season tournament game. We've got Denver, so Aaron Gordon's back in town. And then we've got a really early tip for us. Nice Friday night versus the Boston Celtics. And we're hoping it's not going to be a Black Friday for us in that case. So 4 big games coming up. How do you see the week shaking out?
Oh, this is a tough week. This is a big week. I'm gonna cautiously say 2-2. I could see a world where we go 3-1 again. At this point, I've kind of I think after losing that, getting blown out by Brooklyn has really put us back for in-season tournament progress. Even if we do win these 2 games against Toronto and Boston, they're going to have to do something to make up that margin if they're going to be one of those 2 wild. Is it 2 wild cards, or it's 1, isn't it?
I think it's.
I want to say there's 1 wild card from one conference and 1 from the other.
Yeah, there's 2. I think there's 2, 1 from each.
Yeah,
I'm sure in the predictions, the likes of Jokic were going like OKC and Orlando.
Yeah, but regardless of the play-in tournament, the stakes are there. These are important games for Orlando. I predicted at the beginning of the season, didn't I? I said I think we just finished behind Indiana in the standings. You look, they're 7-4. We're 7-5. As good as they are offensively, they are awful defensively. It's like the complete reverse of the Magic.
Yeah.
So you'd expect, as good as we are defensively, we should be able to slow them down a little bit.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get 1 or 2 players back for this one. But then again, is our offense capable of keeping up with theirs? So it's going to be a really interesting game, Indiana, and it might come down to head-to-head at the end of the season. Who gets 6th, who gets 7th? Mm-hmm. You don't know. I think on the road, like you think we're 4-3 on the road. Like we've got a winning record at home, we've got a winning record away, and I think that's really important. I think we're going to lose to the Pacers. I just don't think we've got the offense to stay up with them. Mm-hmm. I think we'll stay in the game. The defense will keep us in the game. Can we have a night where Cole goes off for 20? Can Paolo have another big night like he did in Utah? It's going to need some big games from a few players to stay up with the Pacers. So I'm going to say we lose to the Pacers. We're going to beat the Raptors. They're 5-7. I think they're better than 5-7, probably suggests. But I think we're good at home. I think we're comfortable at home. So I expect us to beat Toronto. Denver. Denver's a tough one. We beat Denver last year. They're 9-3. They're 2-3 on the road. I'm going to say we beat the Denver Nuggets. And I think we're going to lose to the Celtics, because I'm not saying last season was a fluke that we won 3 out of 4, because it wasn't. We really had their number last year. But again, same as Indiana, can you keep Tatum quiet? Can you keep Jaylen Brown quiet? Can you keep Porzingis quiet? Like they are good. They are really good, Boston. Maybe this is a game where do we see J.I. extend his minutes and play a little bit more? Because I fancy J.I. against Porzingis in this game. Even Goga's size against Porzingis will cause a few problems, but we know he likes to play out on the perimeter as well. So if J.I. can play a few more minutes in this and maybe down the stretch, I think the Boston game could be close. But yeah, I'm going to go Indiana loss, beat the Raptors, beat the Nuggets, and lose to the Celtics. What's yours? What are you going with?
You could see anything really from 3-1 to 0-4, but I'm gonna go 1-3.
Okay.
This week, and I think we'll beat Toronto. I think I could see us beating Indiana. I could really see it. It's if you were going off old school wrestling, it's Gorilla Monsoon's irresistible force versus the immovable object. I could, if Paolo and Franz go off, as in they get that space and they go off, we could give them problems. But I just worry, like you say, will the offensive end beat the defensive end of this? I think Denver might have too much. I just think they might have too much. They're defensively pretty good. Aaron Gordon's going to be employed to try and slow down Paolo or Franz, and I could see them filling the paint up and us having to try and live with it. And I just think they're the champions for a reason. And I think Boston is scary this season. When you look at what they've got, I would love to beat Boston, but I think it's a big ask. So I'm gonna go 1-3, but I would be happy with 2-2. I would be over the moon with 2-2. So sorry if it's a little bit negative, but I think the Raptors game will be interesting because I will say Scotty Barnes is having a hell of a season for them, but they aren't a winning team, and we should be looking to beat them at home regardless.
You're right. Like this week could go anyway. Like those are 4 games we are very capable of winning.
Yeah.
It's what team is going to turn up offensively that's going to give us a chance. But I think it was Philip Rossman-Reichel, might have been somebody else earlier this week. Or maybe it's a conversation we had with him on Locked On Magic last week, where games like these Chicago games, like 96-94, and like keeping teams to under 100 points, like these are the games where this Magic team are going to thrive in this year. We don't want games where And that's what worries me about the Indiana game. We don't want games where we're trying to score 120, 130 to keep up with a team like that, because it's not going to happen. Those games are going to be very rare for us. But you could see, like you said, you could see a week where we go 3-1, could go 1-3, you could lose all 4. I don't think we're going to lose all 4. I think we're too good to do that. I think even, like I said, if we could stay afloat and stay at 2-2 this week and stay around that 500 mark, I think we'll be happy, especially whilst we're still waiting for a few players to come back.
Yeah, 2-2. 2-2 would be good given the level of competition this week.
Yeah, 100%.
I would take that. So that will do it for this week, Mikey. If you're watching this on YouTube, can you please give it a subscribe, a like if you really like it, a thumbs up, I think it is. Leave us your comments, your questions. We do try to get back. Follow the podcast, subscribe, leave us a review. It really helps the show grow. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, @_Let's Talk Magic. Follow us, like us, retweet us, everything you can. Every little helps. But for me and Mikey, thanks for taking your time to watch and listen. And as always, go Magic.